Hi, I'm Justin.
Also, I hate the way my voice sounds, so if you can do whatever Photoshop does to voices, make me sound awesome.
And this is my lovely friend,
The beauty in the eyes of the beholder, and it's just about getting into the seat of being the beholder.
Hayley.
I don't think you have to be particularly perceptive. I just think you have to look up.
This podcast is mostly just her telling me stories.
If you expose yourself to the possibility that this might be really awkward, there can be something just really cool on the other side of it.
She thinks that her life and way of looking at things are
Oh, I was kind of waiting on you. I thought you were getting your stuff ready. You're waiting on me?
pretty normal.
You got to edit out all the misinformation about the Amish.
Maybe you can relate.
I would like a chance to re-sing the Amish Paradise.
If you want lighthearted stories
All right, you want to talk about goats?
and stream of consciousness,
I just woke up and needed some friends, and so I bought them.
then you're gonna like the Sunny Side Up podcast.
Sunny side up, sunny side up, sunny side up, sunny side up.
So, if you're at all like me, you may feel that you're living in a world that can be a bit overwhelming and confusing at times. I'm also a huge fan of podcasts, documentaries, docudramas, stories, and of just information in general. Between all of that and the social media and news, sometimes our brains can feel like they're on overload. Hayley and I hope that this podcast can be something of an antidote to all of that. Like little jello shots of joy and distraction. None of it is too serious or really too informative. Mostly it's just two friends who have conversational chemistry talking about whatever enters the minds of relatively ADHD people. We hope you enjoy.
Mob stuff, gangster stuff is fun to watch. It's not a thing I knew much about.
Yeah.
So in a class, a student out of the blue and just raised his hand and was like, what do you think happened to Jimmy Hoffa's body? Or where do you think Jimmy Hoffa's buried? And I was like, never have I ever considered this question, never been asked, don't even know the details.
Yeah.
This is just the thought and all, so many of the guys in the class had immediate answers, all of them different. Is that a thing? Is that a thing
it's
that people...
It's not, but do you know the question that went around on TikTok that wives...
the Roman Empire.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That one was real.
Well, and apparently still is, because this was, I think this was just last semester, but multiple guys had thoughts on this. So I was reading a book called Killing the Mob. James, is it James O'Reilly? Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly, he's like a conservative news pundit. But but now he does this really good series. I've read several of them. They're all good. Killing so-and-so.
Yeah, Killing Jesus, Killing Lincoln, okay.
Yes,
yeah,
and I've read a couple of them. Killing the Witches I was so excited about the Salem witch trials, and it was major stinker. But all of the others, super good. Killing Crazy Horse, wonderful. Killing Lincoln, excellent.
Wow.
Killing the Mob was really interesting, and it started out like Bonnie and Clyde and brought it all the way current through American organized crime and how the federal government tried to squash it. Mm-hmm. And it was super cool. I had no idea how connected the Kennedys were to the mob and the mafia. Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, Joe Kennedy and Frankie.
Yeah, and all of them. Yeah. But Frank Sinatra, did you know his connection to the mob?
Absolutely, it's legendary.
I had no idea.
You didn't know?
I was so ignorant to anything mob related. It was a great book. Maybe it wouldn't be a great book to other people who already knew these things, but to the noob over here, to the uninformed, I was super, super interested. And the mob influence even in politics, which everything influence in politics.
My main point is going to be why the prohibition is actually what launched the mob. I'll tell you about my theory on that in 2 seconds. But there was a great podcast, one of those acted out ones, and I think it may have had I had a crush for just a quick minute on John Hamm, because when I watched Mad Men the first time, such a great show, and Hamm's character really captured me at first time. I had a little bit of a man crush on him, and then I got to accidentally bump into him, fly on the same airplane as him right when he closed that show. Yeah, it was cool. But anywho, I think it was him, but I could be wrong, that did an acted out podcast on the kidnapping of Frank Sinatra's son.
Wait, what? I didn't even know that story. I've got so many things to learn.
It's fabulous. It's one of these crazy stories.
Did they ever get the kid back?
Eventually, they did get the kid back. I don't want to give too much of it away. Like, the kid started semi-cooperating with his captors at some point because they were kind of like they were kind of lovable. And anyways, one of the guys who was involved in the kidnapping syndrome was actually interviewed. He's like interviewed in like the real guy is interviewed, I think, and gets to tell his part of the story in this podcast. It's pretty wonderful. But all of that to say, it was kind of like you kidnap Frank's son, who is, Frank is absolutely connected to the mob. Like, you guys are going to die a horrible death. But anyways, my controversial theory on how the United States essentially created the mob. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
For this? Okay. This goes to my quite libertarian, I guess, bent on politics. It's why I would make like the left and the right would just viciously hate me. But anywho,
easily done. Both sides are so ready to hate.
They're ready to hate.
It's not hard to be hated.
And I'm obviously hateable. So especially I don't know why. It's the way my brain is. I come up with these ideas, but anyways, legalizing or making alcohol illegal created the mafia.
Yeah.
Right. So by deciding that people weren't allowed to drink alcohol, took alcohol away from everybody, they created the mafia, because the mafia was kind of this weak, limp organization until they took away this thing that the public was absolutely going to consume. I don't care if you like it. I don't care what your moral view is.
That's why we keep drugs illegal in this country now.
Thank you. I had this same revelation, by the way. Okay, so
remind me to tell you what I learned about the Klan. Keep going.
Okay, I can't wait to hear about the Klan. But let me tell you, so we made the mafia in this country what it was. It's still around to this day, but they're much more in legitimate business and all that stuff. So they're probably not quite as scary as they were. But anyways, we created them into the multi-gazillion-dollar force they are today. When I got done watching Narcos the first time, the first round of Narcos, I think it was Narcos Mexico, which is also a phenomenal show because I like all things based on real life. So good.
Is that more cartel based?
Yeah.
Okay. I remember seeing the intro for that. Maybe Apple Plus?
No. That's Netflix. That one's Netflix.
Okay.
So good. Oh my God. It's that's a great series.
Okay.
I was so blown away by how many hundreds of billions of dollars we send south of the border to make a white powder that is incredibly inexpensive to make, easy and inexpensive to make. And if they just regulated it and legalized it, you could take all the money that we pump south of the border to probably a handful, like I'm talking 500 to 1,000 absolute psychopathic maniacs who kill tens of thousands of their own people a year. And then that doesn't count all the gang and drug violence that happens on our streets.
And the cocaine hippos.
I don't know what a cocaine hippo. Oh, yeah, and the cocaine. I do know what the cocaine hippos are.
Right.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Anyways, has produced cocaine hippos, another casualty in this war. And all of it could be solved with a little bit of good old-fashioned American... Get out of other,
just unplug your enemy's bounce house. Stop sending money.
Unplug it.
Yes.
Yeah, legalize it. Let's let the American capitalist dream go. Let's regulate it. Let's do all the stuff. And you would immediately crush all those drug empires. Overnight.
Yeah.
You defund them instantly.
100%. But it was significantly reshape Central American politics because everything, I didn't realize the extent to which everything is run by the cartel down there.
Everything.
Like the street vendor, I bought the corn, is it called street corn or am I making that up? Okay.
I think so.
And they were like, even the person you just bought that from really had to get their unofficial permit to be able to do that
license
from the cartel. They're like, the government here operates by virtue of the cartel granting them. And the state that I was going to visit, there was, I don't remember if there was a death or a war or whatever happened, and there was a shift in the power dynamic and a new cartel. They were struggling to see who was going to be the new. So they were like, don't come right now is way too violent because we're currently unsettled over which cartel is going to be in power. And And the government doesn't even really matter because the police are put in place by
all of it
is a trickle.
I hope you heard hundreds of billions of U.S. dollars going into these incredibly poor countries that don't have they don't have an Apple or a Google or all the stuff that we have in America to help support their economy. This is the main thing going. Yeah. And the guys that are running it, these are not grandma next door who bakes cookies for the kids. These are psychopathic maniacs who will rape, murder, and kill their way in power.
We've been told, what if they are actually more legitimate business people and our politicians tell us how terrible they are so that it'll build into their little narrative about why we need to close off the borders or everything else. But I mean, so many times in Central and South America, they would have a very legitimately elected socialist-leaning government because that's what works for their country best. And according to every established political philosopher, that is a well-chosen political structure for their country, the little socialism or whatever. The United States would say, manifest destiny and Roosevelt corollary and all of this other stuff. And we go in and stage a coup and kill their elected leaders and say, this is what you need instead. And we instate somebody who is friendly to U.S. policies.
That's a different issue of what government is best for. I'm not talking about government.
But we put in somebody in their government who is friendly to U.S. policies and turns a blind eye to what's really happening. And what it is probably somebody who's in cahoots with letting the cartel do what they want to do, which the United States is okay with too, in order to exploit what other resources are in the country or let the banana company have all of the assets or whatever.
Yeah,
all of it is so
I see what you're saying. There
connected and backwards. There's so much blood on our hands as a U.S. citizen that we're not even aware of. It makes me lose sleep at night.
I know, except... and then we're going to move on because I don't want to get too deeply political.
About how
all these little socialist countries, unfortunately, i.e. Venezuela, i.e. all the rest of them, and now as I get older, I'm going to start sounding like a more and more conservative maniac, and I promise
what if they're only poor because we exploited them into perpetual poverty? They might have done better and not been only the cartel has money if the United States would have just stayed out of it.
Yeah, it's I get where you're going. The problem is the world is now we're world trade type of world, right? So where the majority of people aren't living on little plots of land growing green beans. That's just not what we are. So in that world, so that reality, which was absolutely shaped by Western thought, and you can say it's been a great thing or a bad thing. We'll leave that for another podcast or thought. I tend to lean towards good, but I can get there. I definitely also think we've had, there's a lot of bad things, but regardless, that's just the world we live in. And the little countries that essentially the socialist guy essentially becomes a dictator, i.e. Venezuela, where he took a very prosperous, beautiful country. My favorite donut place nearby is this beautiful little Venezuelan lady who runs it, and she had to escape her own damn country because she was an entrepreneurial, capitalistic little lady making beautiful donuts in Venezuela, and then that freaking little dictator socialist dude just completely trashed their country because socialism works on paper, communism works on paper. Unfortunately, call it a glitch in human whatever, it doesn't work in real life. I wish it did. I desperately wish it did. I think the only people that can achieve high levels of socialism and do pretty good are, again, going to be our little neighbors in the Netherlands, Finland, those guys.
Canada
does okay, but Canada, again, lives upstairs from the U.S. It has an artificial...
Most of Europe has I'll say this, according to the political philosophers, a small homogenous population with a homogenous spread of resources.
Hence,
throughout.
Netherlands, Finland, whatever.
It's got to be the right situation.
Right. If you have a small group of white people who have
Which is why it would have worked well in these small Central American countries, because they were small enough with a homogenous enough population and resources that probably would have worked well for them.
Okay, I'll give you here's why it doesn't totally work though. You got Nicaragua, which does not do drugs. They looked at all their neighbors and were like, we're not doing drugs. Okay? And so they're not a drug economy. There's little to no anything grown, shipped through Nicaragua just stays out of that mess. But they have a socialist government that has turned into essentially a dictatorship that now oppresses its people and totally is driving their economy into the toilet. And I have, again, sister-in-law that lives there.
Yeah.
I don't want to say too much. I don't want her to, like, I can't imagine anybody in Nicaragua in the government would listen to our silly little podcast. But right. But so we won't name any names. But you watch, like, her hubby is very entrepreneurial. He loves his people. He wants to raise them up. And the government cannot squish people like that fast enough. They're determined to drive their entire country right into the toilet. And they are not influenced by drugs because they decided a long time ago, like, we don't want to end up like Colombia. We don't want to end up like these other places. And so they're just poor, good old-fashioned poor. But they could have worked their way out in a more democratized, capitalistic environment. And that's just not so I'm not saying it couldn't work in a super agrarian society way back in the day. It just does not work.
Would we call them a real socialist country at this moment, though? It's more of a dictatorship.
That's what I'm saying. But it always goes that way, unfortunately.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So to get, like, where it works best is, again, in small white countries, again, in
Smurfs.
The Finland, Norway, all those places where they have, like, thousands of years of caring about their neighbors. Nobody looks different than them. It's easy. Yeah, God bless you. You hit a little bit of oil money and you pass it around. And would I want to live in one of those places? Probably. Like, they're pretty dang great.
Yeah, consistently voted happiest countries on earth.
Happiest, great education. I mean, like, I'm not trying to say, like, that's a great, I will totally give you, it works there. I just don't know, other than there, where socialism works. And even their brand of socialism is carefully balanced by a healthy amount of democracy, capitalism, and all the rest of the stuff that makes the general Western world sort of work now. So anyways.
The citizenry needs some power.
Absolutely.
Otherwise it would absolutely descend into dictatorship. Got a little more political heavy there, and I don't want to bore you with that. And so if we may digress.
Yes, please. Let's go back to sunny side up stuff.
Hello, lovely friends. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And it would mean the world if you would tell other people about this podcast and maybe even spam your social media accounts with just how much you're enjoying it. If you are, of course. Also, commenting and rating us on whatever platform you're downloading or streaming from is incredibly helpful to a little startup podcast like this one. On the other hand, if you are dissatisfied with your listening experience, please leave all of that hate on someone else's podcast. Just maybe to confuse them a little bit, right? But most of all, we hope you keep looking up and looking for the sunny side of life.